I have said before, and I maintain that a lot of the hatred towards Megan and the vitriol towards Megan is xenophobic in nature. It's xenophobia, pure and simple. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Maybe even 50%. You know, there are people who think, well, it's just about, the 47% of her DNA that's African that has caused this uproar. But I don't think that's the full story. I think, and I have always said, that it is in part xenophobia because if you look at the history of the British people, they don't like foreigners as a general rule, especially foreigners who come in and take one of their most important resource, which is their men. They're very protective of their men, and certainly their sort of high profile men. I mean, the Beatles were British, were they not? And John Lennon was British, and Yoko Ono was not African, right? But I mean, look at that. Look at what happened there, right? Um, Gwyneth Paltrow got away with it with Chris Martin only because I think he wasn't a big star at the time he met her. So, in part, one might even argue that proximity to Gwyneth helped to pull Chris Martin up a little bit, and then he, found his sea legs and he did his thing. But there was, I don't recall there being any deep resentment towards Gwyneth or Madonna with Guy Ritchie. There wasn't a huge blowback for those two because the men were not higher profile than the women. It seems to be a problem more when the man is more high profile than the woman and he's British, right? So I have opined that Megan's, big faux pas was the fact that she is not British. I mean, even if she were British, but if she were biracial and British, she would still have had problems, but not nearly as much as she does being biracial and not British, is my opinion. The irony, though, is that the British royal family is themselves not British. They're not British. You know, they are the House of Windsor was originally what the House of Saxe Coburg or Coburg or something like that, and they are straight up German, right? They're Germans. These are WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, aristocrats, right? They're not British. I mean, the British are also WASPs, largely. But they're Anglo-Saxons, like the Germans. But my sense is, and do correct me if I'm wrong, my sense is that even among Anglo-Saxons, there is a perceived hierarchy of who is the most Anglo-Saxon of the Anglo-Saxons, if that makes sense. So that the Germans are considered to be more Anglo-Saxon, more WASP, higher up the hierarchy of quote unquote human superiority than, say, the British, which is why, the whole Second World War thing happened anyway, because Hitler felt like, um, you know, yeah, he felt like whatever he felt like. I don't even know how to put that in words, right? He had this hierarchy of humanity and people and so on and so forth and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So there is a sense of a hierarchy even among WASPs, right? So Megan coming into this or being brought into it by her husband really created this hornet's nest of resistance, a real hornet's nest of resistance from people who are deeply xenophobic. And I don't think everybody in the UK is xenophobic. In fact, I know that not everybody in the UK is xenophobic, but there is a contingency of xenophobes in the UK with a strong, loud voices and, some with a lot of power. They don't want foreigners, and most definitely, they don't want a foreign woman coming in and you know, you know, taking one of their top men, and UK women also, many of them are very territorial about UK men. In fact, I think I've said this before, where women in general are territorial of the men of their tribe. I mean, it just is true. I mean, if you are an American woman and you go to some place, you're African American, and you move to some place in Africa and you snag some, high profile African man in that country, you get blowback, right? Because you're not, let's say you went to, I don't know, Nigeria or something. You're not Nigerian, right? You're American. Get out. He's ours, right? And so it's not that I'm lambasting British women for something that all groups of women do, but I just think British women have an extra dose of territoriality when it comes to their men, and most definitely when it comes to their high profile men. And it's rooted in xenophobia. And I just think it's so ironic because, the royal family themselves are not, they're not Brits. I mean, they're not British. They're German. They are wasps. Yes, they are wasps, but they're not originally from England. It's interesting though how, what is that? Oh my goodness. I always get these interruptions. I'm sorry. Um, it's interesting though how, you know, such a xenophobic society and population embraced a non-British monarchy, to be ruled by people who are not ancestrally British themselves, you know, and to have their king not be British, and their queen not be British. And that's true only because they consider, I think, the Germans to be superior to them. It's a question of superiority, inferiority, and a hierarchy of humanity that they have espoused for centuries. Where they feel that people are better than people, and this person is better than that person is better than that person, and they have this whole hierarchy. And so, of course, people of African DNA are at the bottom of this hierarchy, which is really, in part, why Meghan is so unacceptable to them. Is that her DNA, her humanity just isn't high enough up on the food chain. And so it's very, very interesting to me that these same people just, don't care that their own king and queen and, and so on are not even British.